The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the weathered station at Fort Yuma, Arizona Territory, sending dust clouds billowing into the scorching June air of 1878, and when the door opened, Hannah Dawson tumbled out with hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the frame to steady herself. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, tossed her trunk down without ceremony. "End of the line, miss. Good luck to you." Hannah stood there in the relentless heat, her dark traveling dress already clinging to her skin with perspiration, her chestnut hair escaping its pins in wild tendrils around her pale face. The trembling in her hands spread up her arms, making her whole body quake despite the oppressive warmth. She had come so far, fled so desperately, and now stood in a town she had never seen, knowing not a single soul. The main street of Fort Yuma stretched before her, a collection of sun-bleached buildings that seemed to shimmer in the heat. Saloons, a general store, a livery stable, and various other establishments lined the dusty thoroughfare. The Colorado River glinted in the distance, a promise of water in this harsh desert landscape. Soldiers from the nearby fort moved about their business, mixing with civilians, traders, and the occasional cowhand coming in from the surrounding ranches. She tried to pick up her trunk, but her trembling hands betrayed her. The leather handle slipped from her grasp, and the heavy case thudded back to the ground. Tears of frustration burned her eyes. She had traveled all the way from St. Louis, running from a marriage her father had arranged to a cruel man 3 times her age. At 22, she had chosen poverty and uncertainty over that particular prison, spending her last dollars on the journey west. But now, standing alone and friendless in this frontier town, the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. "Madam, you look like you might need some help." The voice was gentle, tinged with concern. Hannah looked up to find a tall cowboy regarding her with kind blue eyes that seemed almost startling in their clarity. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair, and waited patiently for her response. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and the lean, muscular build of someone who spent long hours in the saddle. His clothes were simple but clean: worn denim trousers, a blue cotton shirt, and a leather vest. A bandana hung loosely around his neck, and dust covered his boots. Hannah started, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The trembling had worsened, and she clasped her hands together trying to stop it, but they shook like leaves in a storm. The cowboy's expression shifted to one of deeper concern. He stepped closer, moving slowly as if approaching a spooked horse. "My name is Samuel Quinn. I work at the Double Creek Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I can see you are distressed. Would you allow me to help you?" Hannah nodded, unable to form words. The kindness in his voice was so unexpected after the harsh weeks of travel, after the cruel words of her father when she had refused his plans, after the conductor's suspicion when she traveled alone, after the other passengers' whispers and judgments. Samuel noticed her trembling hands. Without asking permission, he gently reached out and took both of her hands in his own. His palms were calloused and warm, rough from years of ranch work, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "You are safe here," he said quietly, his voice steady and calm. "Whatever you are running from or running to, you are safe in this moment." Hannah felt the warmth of his hands seep into her cold, trembling fingers. She looked down at their joined hands, mesmerized by the simple human contact, the first kind touch she had felt in months. Slowly, impossibly, the trembling began to subside. He did not rush her or pull away. He simply stood there in the dusty street, holding her hands, letting his steady calm transfer to her frayed nerves. "That is better," he said after a few moments, a small smile crossing his face. It was not a mocking smile or one of superiority, but genuinely warm. My mother used to shake like that during thunderstorms. My father would hold her hands just like this until she steadied. He said sometimes a person just needs to borrow someone else's calm for a little while. Hannah found her voice at last. "Thank you. I apologize for being so foolish." "Nothing foolish about it," Samuel said, releasing her hands gently. "You have clearly traveled a long way. You have somewhere to stay, someone expecting you." The question brought reality crashing back. "No," Hannah admitted. "I came here hoping to find work. I was told there might be positions for a schoolteacher or perhaps work in a shop." Samuel frowned slightly, not in disapproval but in thought. "There is talk of opening a school, but nothing has been settled yet. The general store is run by Mr. and Mrs. Patterson. They are good people. Mrs. Patterson might know of situations available for a respectable lady." He paused, then added carefully, "I do not mean to pry, but are you alone, truly alone?" "Yes," Hannah said, lifting her chin with a touch of defiance. "And I intend to stay that way. I have no need of a husband or a keeper." Samuel's eyes crinkled with amusement, but he did not laugh at her. "Understood, madam. I was only asking to know if I should be watching for someone who might be following you. You have the look of someone who left in a hurry." Hannah felt herself flush. Was she so transparent? "My father wanted me to marry a man I could not abide, a wealthy man but cruel. I chose this instead." "That took courage," Samuel said simply. He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Let me carry this to the boarding house. Mrs. Chen runs a respectable establishment near the river. She will give you a fair price and safe lodging while you get your bearings." Hannah fell into step beside him as they walked down the main street. People glanced at them with curiosity, but Samuel greeted several by name, and his presence seemed to lend her respectability. The town was smaller than she had imagined, rough around the edges, but there was an energy to it, a sense of possibility. "You said you work at a ranch?" Hannah asked, trying to make conversation to distract herself from the stairs. "Yes, madam. The Double Creek Ranch. I have been there for 3 years now. Started as a regular hand, but now I am the foreman. We raise cattle and horses, supply beef to the fort and the mining camps to the east." He spoke matter-of-factly, without boasting. "It is honest work, and Mr. Thornton, who owns the ranch, is a fair man." They arrived at a low adobe building with a wooden sign that read, "Chen's Boarding House." A neat garden of desert plants grew in the front, carefully tended despite the harsh climate. Samuel knocked on the door, and a moment later it opened to reveal a petite Chinese woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her English accented but clear. "What brings you to town today?" "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Hannah Dawson. She has just arrived on the stage and needs lodging. I hoped you might have a room available." Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes swept over Hannah, taking in every detail. Hannah had the sense of being thoroughly assessed in those few seconds. Whatever Mrs. Chen saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded and stepped back to allow them entry. "I have a room on the second floor, clean, with a good bed and a window that catches the morning breeze. $2 a week, including breakfast and supper." Hannah's heart sank. At that price, her remaining money would last perhaps 3 weeks, 4 if she was very frugal. But she had no choice. "That would be acceptable, thank you." Samuel carried her trunk upstairs to a small but immaculately clean room. A simple iron bed stood against one wall, covered with a colorful quilt. A washstand, a chair, and a small dresser completed the furnishings. The promised window looked out over the river, and Hannah could see the water sparkling in the afternoon sun. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn," Hannah said formally as Samuel set down her trunk. "You have been very kind to a stranger." "We were all strangers here once," Samuel replied. He hesitated at the door as if wanting to say more, then simply touched the brim of his hat. "Welcome to Fort Yuma, Miss Dawson. I hope you find what you are looking for here." After he left, Hannah sank onto the bed, exhaustion overwhelming her. Her hands had finally stopped trembling completely. She looked down at them, remembering the feeling of Samuel Quinn's steady grip, the way his calm had flowed into her like cool water on parched ground. She had come west expecting harshness and danger, not kindness from a gentle cowboy with understanding eyes. The next morning, Hannah woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee and frying bacon wafting up from the kitchen. She dressed carefully in her least worn day dress, a simple gray cotton that made her look older and more serious. She needed to appear respectable, employable. After pinning her hair into a severe bun, she descended to the dining room. Mrs. Chen served breakfast at a long table where several other boarders were already seated. There was a clerk from the freight office, 2 soldiers from the fort, and an older woman who introduced herself as Miss Abernathy, a seamstress. The conversation was polite and subdued, and Hannah was grateful not to be bombarded with questions. After breakfast, she set out to explore the town properly and to inquire about employment. Her first stop was the general store Samuel had mentioned. Patterson's general store was a large building stocked with everything from dry goods to farming implements. Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman with a kind face and graying blonde hair, greeted Hannah warmly. "A school teacher, you say?" Mrs. Patterson pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Well, we have been talking about getting a proper school started for months now. We have about 15 children in town who need educating, but the town council has not allocated funds yet. Men talk and talk, but never seem to decide anything." She sighed. "However, I might have something that could tide you over in the meantime. Can you read and write well? Do figures?" "Yes, madam. I attended a finishing school in St. Louis and helped my mother with household accounts for years." "Well then, I could use someone to help me in the store a few days a week. My husband's rheumatism has been troubling him, and I cannot manage everything alone. It would not be much, but I could pay you $1 a day for 3 days of work each week, and you could have a small discount on any goods you need." It was not much, but it was something. Hannah accepted gratefully. Mrs. Patterson put her to work immediately, showing her where items were stored, how to measure out flour and sugar, how to calculate purchases and make change from the cash box. The work was simple but required attention to detail, and Hannah found herself enjoying the straightforward nature of it. During a lull in customers, Mrs. Patterson made tea and the 2 women sat behind the counter. "If you do not mind my asking, dear, what brings a refined young lady like yourself all the way out to Fort Yuma? This is not exactly the lap of luxury." Hannah had prepared for this question. "I wanted to make my own way in the world, Mrs. Patterson, to be independent. That is not easy for a woman back east." Mrs. Patterson nodded knowingly. "Running from something or to something, we do not judge here. Most folks in the territories have their own stories. You will find Fort Yuma can be a good place for a fresh start if you are willing to work hard." Over the next week, Hannah settled into a routine. She worked at the general store 3 days a week, and on her free days, she explored the town and the surrounding area. Fort Yuma sat at the confluence of the Gila and Colorado rivers, a strategic location that made it an important military post and trading center. The desert landscape was harsh, but possessed a stark beauty that gradually revealed itself to her. She did not see Samuel Quinn during that first week, though she found herself thinking of him often, remembering the gentleness of his voice and the steadying warmth of his hands. She scolded herself for such thoughts. She had not come west to entangle herself with a man, no matter how kind he seemed. On Sunday, Hannah attended services at the small church on the edge of town. The minister, Reverend Cooper, was an earnest young man barely older than Hannah herself. His sermon was simple but heartfelt, and Hannah found comfort in the familiar rhythms of worship. After the service, several townspeople introduced themselves, and Hannah began to feel less like a stranger. As she was leaving the church, she saw Samuel Quinn hitching his horse outside. He was dressed in clean clothes, his hair still damp as if he had recently bathed. When he saw her, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Miss Dawson, how good to see you. Are you settling in well?" "Yes, thank you, Mr. Quinn. Mrs. Patterson has given me work at the store." "That is excellent news." He fell into step beside her as they walked back toward the main street. "I have been meaning to come by and check on you, but we have been busy at the ranch. Roundup season." "I would not expect you to check on me," Hannah said quickly. "You have already done more than enough." Samuel smiled. "It is no burden, I assure you. In fact, I wonder if you might allow me to show you some of the countryside around Fort Yuma. There are some beautiful spots along the river that are particularly fine this time of year. It would be a shame to spend all your time in town when there is so much to see." Hannah hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to avoid any entanglement. But something in Samuel's honest blue eyes, the genuine warmth of his invitation, made her reconsider. What harm could there be in seeing the landscape? She had come west partly for adventure, after all. "I suppose that would be acceptable," she said carefully, "as long as it is understood that I am not seeking any romantic attachment." Samuel's lips twitched with amusement. "Understood, Miss Dawson. Strictly a tour of the local geography. Would next Saturday suit you? I could borrow a buggy from the ranch." And so it was arranged. Hannah tried to tell herself it meant nothing, that she was simply being friendly and taking advantage of an opportunity to see more of her new home. But she noticed that she took extra care with her appearance on Saturday morning, choosing her best day dress, a soft blue cotton that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes. Samuel arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, driving a neat buggy pulled by a handsome bay horse. He helped Hannah up to the seat with careful courtesy, and they set off northward along the river road. The morning was already warm, but a breeze from the water made it bearable. As they drove, Samuel pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. He spoke about the Quechan people who had lived in this region for generations, how the fort had been established in 1850 to protect travelers and settlers, how the town had grown up around the military presence and river trade. "The desert seems harsh at first," Samuel said, guiding the horse around a rough patch in the road. "But once you learn to see it properly, there is beauty everywhere. You just have to know where to look." He proved his point by taking her to a spot where a small spring fed a grove of cottonwood trees, creating a shaded oasis in the midst of the arid landscape. They spread a blanket in the shade, and Samuel unpacked a simple picnic he had brought: bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of cool water. As they ate, Hannah found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. Samuel was easy to talk to, never pressing her with difficult questions, content to share stories about ranch life and listen when she chose to speak. She found herself telling him about her mother, who had died 2 years earlier, about her love of books and learning, about her dream of teaching children who might otherwise go without education. "You would make a fine teacher," Samuel said seriously. "You have the patience for it and the kindness. Children need kindness as much as they need knowledge." "Did you have a kind teacher?" Hannah asked. Samuel shook his head. "I had no formal schooling at all. My parents had a small farm in Texas and there was no school nearby. My mother taught me to read from the Bible, and my father taught me numbers so I could manage accounts and not be cheated. Everything else I learned by doing. Yet you became a ranch foreman at such a young age. That speaks well of your abilities." Samuel shrugged modestly. "I learned horses from my father. He had a gift with them, could gentle the wildest mustang with just patience and time. I watched him, learned from him. When I came to the Double Creek, Mr. Thornton saw that I had that same skill. I worked hard, proved myself reliable, and he promoted me." "What brought you to Arizona Territory?" Hannah asked. A shadow crossed Samuel's face. "My parents died of fever when I was 19, lost the farm to debts we could not pay. I had nothing keeping me in Texas, so I drifted west looking for a fresh start, found it here." Hannah felt a kinship with this admission. "We are both starting over then." "Yes," Samuel agreed, his eyes meeting hers with understanding. "Though I have to say, my second start has been good to me. I hope yours will be too." They spent several hours at the oasis, talking and enjoying the peace of the place. Samuel told her about the ranch, about the vast herds of cattle and the wild beauty of the open range. He described the challenges of the work, the satisfaction of it, the camaraderie among the ranch hands. Hannah listened, fascinated by this world so different from anything she had known in St. Louis. When they finally returned to town, the sun was beginning to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Samuel helped Hannah down from the buggy, his hands lingering just a moment at her waist, and she felt a flutter in her chest that she tried to ignore. "Thank you for today," she said sincerely. "It was lovely." "Would you allow me to call on you again?" Samuel asked. "Perhaps we could attend the town social next month. They hold one every summer, with dancing and food. It would give you a chance to meet more people." Hannah knew she should refuse. She had been so determined to remain independent, to avoid any romantic entanglement. But looking into Samuel's hopeful face, she found herself unable to say no. "I would like that," she heard herself say. Samuel's smile was radiant. "Then I will look forward to it, Miss Dawson." Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Samuel would come to town each Sunday after church, and he and Hannah would spend time together, sometimes taking rides into the countryside, sometimes simply walking along the river or sitting in the small park near the mission. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their thoughts and dreams, their pasts and their hopes for the future. Hannah continued her work at the general store, and Mrs. Patterson, noticing the growing attachment between Hannah and Samuel, smiled knowingly but said nothing. The other townspeople began to accept Hannah as one of their own, and she found herself making friends among the other women in Fort Yuma. In July, the town council finally approved funds for a school, and Hannah was offered the position of schoolmistress. The salary was modest but steady, and combined with her work at the store, it would allow her to save a little money. The school would not start until September, giving her time to prepare lessons and organize the one-room schoolhouse that had stood empty for 2 years. Samuel was genuinely delighted when she told him the news. They were sitting by the river on a Sunday afternoon, watching the water flow past. "This is wonderful, Hannah," he said, using her given name for the first time. They had progressed beyond the formality of Miss Dawson and Mr. Quinn over the past weeks. "You will be such a gift to those children." "I hope so," Hannah said. "I want to make a real difference, Samuel. I want the children here to have opportunities, to know that education can open doors for them." Samuel reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting between them. "You will, I have no doubt." Hannah looked down at their joined hands, remembering that first day when he had held her trembling hands until they steadied. So much had changed since then. She had found work, found friends, found a purpose. And she had found something else, Something she had not been looking for, but that had crept up on her nonetheless. She had found love. The realization struck her with the force of a lightning bolt. Somewhere between that first meeting and this moment, she had fallen completely in love with Samuel Quinn. His gentleness, his kindness, his steady strength, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he made her laugh, the way he saw her as a person, not as a possession or an ornament. "Samuel," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He turned to her, concern evident in his eyes. "What is it?" "When I came to Fort Yuma, I was so certain I would never want to marry, never want to tie myself to a man. My father's choice had so disgusted me with the very idea of marriage that I thought I would be content alone." Samuel's hand tightened on hers, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "But you have shown me that not all men are like my father or the man he chose for me. You have been nothing but respectful and kind. You have never tried to control me or change me. You have supported my dreams and celebrated my successes." She took a deep breath. "I find myself falling in love with you, and I do not know what to do about it." Samuel's face transformed with joy. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Hannah, I have been in love with you since the day you arrived on that stage, looking so brave and so scared all at once. I have been courting you these past weeks, hoping you might come to care for me as I care for you. But I did not want to rush you or pressure you. I knew you needed time." "I do love you," Hannah said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "But I need you to understand something. I cannot be a wife who simply obeys and stays silent. I have opinions and dreams of my own." Samuel smiled. "I would not want you any other way. My mother was a strong woman, Hannah. She ran our farm as much as my father did. They were partners, true partners in everything. That is the kind of marriage I want. Two people who respect each other, support each other, walk through life side by side." "That is what I want too," Hannah whispered. Samuel leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and Hannah felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. When they parted, both were smiling. "Will you marry me, Hannah Dawson?" Samuel asked. "Will you be my partner, my companion, my love?" "Yes," Hannah said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Quinn." They sat by the river as the sun set, making plans for their future. Samuel wanted to save enough money to buy his own ranch one day, and Hannah wanted to continue teaching. They talked about building a house together, about filling it with children and laughter and love. "I should speak to Mr. Thornton," Samuel said as they walked back to town, his arm around Hannah's waist. "He has been good to me. I want to tell him in person before the news spreads through town." "And I should write to my father," Hannah said, though the thought filled her with trepidation. "I do not expect his blessing, but he should know." They decided to marry in the fall, after the school year was well underway. It would give them time to save money and make proper preparations. Samuel found a small house for rent near the school, a simple adobe structure with 2 rooms and a yard where Hannah could plant a garden. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Fort Yuma, and Hannah was surprised by the warmth of the congratulations she received. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting a party for them at the store, and nearly the whole town turned out to celebrate. Even Mrs. Chen smiled and offered to make Hannah's wedding dress, revealing skills as a seamstress that Hannah had not known she possessed. September arrived, and with it came the opening of school. Hannah had 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Some could barely write their names, while others had received some education from their parents. Hannah threw herself into teaching with passion and dedication, creating lessons that would challenge each child at their own level. Samuel came to town whenever he could, usually on Sundays, though sometimes he would appear unexpectedly during the week. just to see her for a few minutes before riding back to the ranch. Each visit strengthened the bond between them, deepening their love and their certainty that they were meant for each other. In October, Hannah received a letter from her father. She opened it with shaking hands, remembering the last time she had seen him, the angry words he had shouted as she left. But the letter's contents surprised her. Her father wrote that, while he was disappointed in her choice to leave, he had made inquiries about Samuel Quinn through business contacts and had learned that he was a man of good character and prospects. While he could not give his full blessing to a marriage so far beneath Hannah's station, he would not stand in her way. He enclosed a small bank draft as a wedding gift, enough to purchase furnishings for their new home. Hannah cried when she read it, both from relief and from sadness. Her father could not understand why she had chosen this life, but at least he was not completely cutting her off. She wrote back immediately, thanking him for the gift and assuring him that she was happy, truly happy, for the first time in years. The wedding was planned for the first Saturday in November. Reverend Cooper would officiate, and the ceremony would be held in the little church with a reception afterward at the town hall. Hannah wore the beautiful dress Mrs. Chen had made, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk that Mrs. Patterson had ordered specially. Samuel wore a new suit that he had purchased in Yuma, looking handsome and nervous as he waited at the altar. The church was full of friends and well-wishers. Mrs. Patterson stood as Hannah's matron of honor, and Jack Morrison, one of the other hands from the Double Creek Ranch, served as Samuel's best man. When Hannah walked down the aisle, she saw Samuel's face light up with such love and joy that she felt tears spring to her eyes. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and honor each other, to be faithful and true, to walk through life as partners. When Reverend Cooper pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her tenderly, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was a joyful affair with food, music, and dancing. Hannah found herself swept from one partner to another as various men claimed dances, but she kept looking for Samuel, finding him always watching her with that same expression of wonder and love. Finally, as the evening drew to a close, Samuel claimed his bride and they slipped away to their little house. Someone had decorated it with ribbons and flowers, and a fire burned in the hearth, warming the room against the November chill. Samuel carried Hannah over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of their new home. "Mrs. Quinn," he said softly, cupping her face in his hands. "My wife, my husband," Hannah replied, reaching up to kiss him. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, giving and receiving pleasure, becoming truly one flesh as the Bible described. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly about their hopes and dreams for the future. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked, stroking her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Hannah answered truthfully. "When I arrived in Fort Yuma, I was so scared, so uncertain. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. But you steadied me, Samuel. You gave me the courage to build a new life." "You already had that courage inside you," Samuel said. "I just held your hand while you found it." They fell asleep that way, tangled together, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The first months of marriage brought adjustments and challenges. Samuel continued to work at the Double Creek Ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. Hannah taught school during the week and kept house in the evenings and on weekends. Money was tight, but they were happy, finding joy in simple pleasures: shared meals, quiet evenings reading by the fire, Sunday rides into the countryside. In February, Hannah realized she was with child. The discovery filled her with both joy and terror. She had lost her own mother, had no female relatives nearby to guide her through this experience. But Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen rallied around her, offering advice and support, sharing their own experiences of childbirth. Samuel was overjoyed at the news. He had always wanted children, and the thought of becoming a father filled him with pride and protectiveness. He became even more attentive to Hannah, worrying about her health, insisting she not overwork herself. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Hannah protested when Samuel tried to forbid her from carrying water from the well. "I know, but I want you to be careful," Samuel said. "You and the baby are precious to me." Hannah softened at his concern. "We will be fine, I promise, but I appreciate your care." As spring turned to summer, Hannah's pregnancy advanced. She continued teaching until the end of the school year in May, then reluctantly gave up her position to prepare for the baby's arrival. The school board assured her that her job would be waiting when she was ready to return, though they would need to find a temporary replacement. In late August of 1879, Hannah went into labor on a hot afternoon. Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen attended her, while Samuel paced anxiously in the front room, forbidden from the birthing chamber as was customary. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Hannah screamed and cried, certain she would die, but the two older women encouraged her, telling her she was strong, she could do this. Finally, as the sun rose over the desert, Hannah gave one last tremendous push and felt the baby slide from her body. A moment later, a thin, outraged wail filled the room. "A boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, wrapping the infant in a clean cloth. "A healthy baby boy." They placed the baby in Hannah's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature with wonder. He had a shock of dark hair and was already waving his little fists in protest at being thrust into the cold, bright world. Samuel was allowed in, and he approached the bed with tears streaming down his face. "A son," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "We have a son." "What shall we name him?" Hannah asked. They had discussed names for weeks but had not been able to agree. Now, looking at their child, Samuel said, "James, after my father, James Quinn." Hannah smiled. "James Samuel Quinn, that sounds perfect." Little James was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping reasonably well for an infant. Hannah was exhausted and overwhelmed those first weeks, but Samuel helped whenever he could, changing diapers, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, taking over household tasks so Hannah could rest. "I thought men did not do such things," Hannah said one evening, watching Samuel expertly swaddle their son. "Some men do not," Samuel agreed. "But I remember my father doing all of this for my younger sisters. He said caring for children was not women's work or men's work, it was parents' work." Hannah felt a surge of love for her husband. She had made the right choice in marrying him, she thought. He was everything her father's choice had not been: kind, gentle, respectful, loving. As James grew from an infant to a toddler, Hannah gradually returned to teaching, first just a few hours a week, then half days, with Mrs. Chen watching James while she was at school. Samuel received a raise in his wages, and they were able to save a little money each month toward their dream of owning their own ranch. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. They were not wealthy, but they had enough. They had each other, they had their son, they had friends and meaningful work. Hannah sometimes thought back to that terrified girl who had tumbled off the stagecoach with trembling hands, hardly able to believe she was the same person who now felt so confident and capable. In the spring of 1881, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She worked until July, then took leave to prepare for the new baby's arrival. Their daughter was born in September, an easier birth than James had been. She came into the world with a lusty cry and a full head of red gold hair that must have come from some ancestor neither Hannah nor Samuel knew about. "Sarah," Hannah said immediately. "I want to call her Sarah after my mother." "Sarah Quinn," Samuel said, cradling his daughter. "Perfect." With 2 children, their little house felt cramped. Samuel began to seriously plan for purchasing land and building a larger home. He spoke with Mr. Thornton, who was getting older and thinking about the future of the Double Creek Ranch. "I do not have children," Mr. Thornton told Samuel one day. "My wife passed before we were blessed with any. I have been thinking about what will happen to this ranch when I am gone." Samuel listened, uncertain where this was heading. "You have been loyal to me for 8 years now," Mr. Thornton continued. "You run this ranch better than I could myself at this point. I have a proposition for you. I will sell you a portion of the ranch, say 2,000 acres to the north, the section along Cottonwood Creek. You can pay me over time from the profits of your herd. When I pass, if you are still interested and can manage the finances, you could purchase the rest of the ranch from my estate." Samuel was stunned. "Sir, I do not know what to say. That is incredibly generous." "It is good business," Mr. Thornton said gruffly. "I would rather see this ranch go to someone who loves it and will care for it than have it sold to strangers after I am gone. Think about it, talk to your wife, and let me know." Samuel rode home that evening bursting with the news. Hannah was nursing Sarah when he arrived, and James was playing with wooden blocks on the floor. Samuel swept James up into his arms, kissed Hannah soundly, and announced Mr. Thornton's offer. Hannah's eyes widened. "Samuel, that is wonderful, but can we manage it financially?" They spent the evening going over figures, calculating what they could afford. It would be tight, very tight, for the first few years. They would need to hire a few hands to help work the land. Hannah would need to continue teaching to supplement their income. But it was possible. It was actually possible. "Let us do it," Hannah said finally. "Let us build our own ranch, our own legacy for our children." Samuel drew up the papers with Mr. Thornton, and in January of 1882 they became the owners of 2,000 acres of Arizona Territory rangeland. They named it the Cottonwood Creek Ranch, after the small stream that ran through the property and the grove of cottonwood trees that marked the site where they would build their house. Building the house took months. Samuel did much of the work himself with help from some of the other ranch hands, working evenings and weekends. Hannah helped when she could, planning the layout, choosing where windows should go to catch the breeze and the light. They built it larger than they currently needed, planning for more children, for a future they could now see clearly before them. They moved into the new house in June, and Hannah cried when she walked through the front door for the first time as its mistress. It was a simple ranch house, adobe and wood, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and their own dreams. The next years were hard but rewarding. They worked from dawn to dusk, building up their herd, breaking horses to sell to the army and to other ranchers. Hannah continued teaching, riding into Fort Yuma 3 days a week, returning to the ranch to manage the household and help with the bookkeeping in the evenings. They had 2 more children, another boy in 1883 whom they named Daniel, and another girl in 1885 whom they named Elizabeth. The house rang with the sound of children's laughter, with the noise and chaos of a growing family. Samuel proved to be an excellent rancher, with the same gift for horses his father had possessed. He began to develop a reputation throughout the territory for being able to gentle even the wildest Mustang, and people would bring him their problem horses to train. The additional income helped them pay down their debt to Mr. Thornton ahead of schedule. In 1886, Mr. Thornton fell ill. Samuel visited him often, sitting with the old man, talking about the ranch and old times. In October, Mr. Thornton passed away peacefully in his sleep. His will left the remainder of the Double Creek Ranch to Samuel, with the stipulation that Samuel pay a fair price to Mr. Thornton's distant cousins, the only family he had left. With careful negotiation and a loan from the bank in Yuma, Samuel was able to make the purchase. At 33 years old, he found himself the owner of one of the largest ranches in the southern Arizona territory. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Hannah helped him manage the business side, her education and facility with numbers proving invaluable. Together, they built the ranch into a prosperous operation, known throughout the territory for quality cattle and well-trained horses. Despite their success, they never forgot their humble beginnings. They were generous to their workers, paying fair wages and treating everyone with respect. When drought struck in 1888, and many smaller ranchers were struggling, Samuel extended credit to his neighbors, helping them get through the hard times. Hannah eventually gave up teaching to focus on the ranch and their children, though she made sure all 4 children received excellent educations. She ordered books from back east and taught her children herself when they were young, then sent them to the school in Fort Yuma when they were older. James grew into a serious, responsible young man who clearly would take over the ranch one day. Sarah was spirited and adventurous, always riding off into the desert to explore, giving her parents heart attacks with her fearlessness. Daniel was gentle and loved animals, spending hours caring for injured creatures he found on the range. Elizabeth, the baby, was the scholar of the family, always with her nose in a book. The years passed in a blur of seasons, of round-ups and brandings, of birthdays and holidays, of small triumphs and occasional setbacks. Samuel and Hannah grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, Samuel took Hannah back to the oasis where they had shared their first picnic all those years ago. The cottonwood trees were taller now, the spring still flowing clear and cold. They spread a blanket in the shade, just as they had done 2 decades earlier, and sat looking out at the desert landscape. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "Leaving your comfortable life in St. Louis for this?" Hannah looked at her husband, at the lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, at the silver threading through his brown hair, at the weathered hands that had held hers so gently that first day and countless times since. She thought of their 4 children, their ranch, the life they had built together. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "I found everything I needed right here. I found purpose, independence, a home, and I found you." Samuel kissed her, as tender and sweet as the first time, all those years ago. "I love you, Hannah Quinn. I have loved you from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach with your trembling hands and your brave heart. And I love you, Samuel Quinn. You steadied me when I was shaking with fear. You gave me the courage to become who I was meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the sun move across the sky. After a while, Hannah spoke again. "You remember what you told me that first day? That sometimes a person just needs to borrow someone else's calm for a little while, I remember. I think we have been doing that for each other all these years. When I am anxious, you steady me. When you are troubled, I calm you. We balance each other." Samuel smiled. "We do. We make a good team, you and I." As the afternoon waned, they packed up their picnic and headed back to the ranch. Their children were all home for the anniversary celebration, and the house would be full of noise and laughter. James was courting a nice girl from town, and Sarah had been accepted to a teaching college in California. Daniel was talking about becoming a veterinarian, and Elizabeth was only 12 but already talking about one day being a writer. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. They had built something lasting, something good. Not just a ranch, but a family, a legacy, a love that would endure. In 1902, Hannah and Samuel became grandparents for the first time when James married his sweetheart, Catherine, and they had a son the following year. More grandchildren followed as their other children grew up and married. The ranch house that had seemed so large when they built, it was now often filled to bursting with children and grandchildren, especially during holidays. Samuel taught his grandsons to ride and rope, passing on the skills his own father had taught him. Hannah taught her granddaughters to read and figure, though she also made sure the girls learned to ride and rope just as well as the boys. The world was changing, she insisted, and women needed every skill they could acquire. As they moved into their 60s, Samuel and James worked the ranch together, though Samuel was gradually stepping back and letting his son take the lead. Hannah spent her days tending her garden, reading, writing letters to her far-flung children and friends, and enjoying her grandchildren. On quiet evenings, she and Samuel would sit on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the desert they had come to love. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories or discussing ranch business. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, enjoying each other's presence. "You know what I think about sometimes," Hannah said one evening in the summer of 1910. They were both 67 now, their hair completely silver, their bodies marked by decades of hard work. "What is that?" Samuel asked. "That girl who stepped off the stage coach in Fort Yuma 32 years ago. She was so frightened, so lost. If I could go back and talk to her, I would tell her that everything was going to be all right, better than all right. I would tell her that the gentle cowboy who held her trembling hands was going to be the love of her life, that together they would build something beautiful." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, as he had done countless times over the years. "I think about that day, too. I saw this brave, beautiful woman trying so hard to be strong even though she was terrified. I knew in that moment that I wanted to spend the rest of my life making sure she never had to be that frightened again." "You kept that promise," Hannah said softly. "You have made me feel safe and loved every single day since." They sat together as the stars came out, as they had done thousands of times before. The desert night was cool and clear, the air filled with the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing as they played a game before bedtime. This was everything Hannah had never known she wanted when she fled St. Louis all those years ago. She had been running from something, but she had found so much more than she could have imagined. She had found a home, a purpose, a family, and a love that had sustained her through decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Samuel had been right that first day. Sometimes a person just needed to borrow someone else's calm for a little while. But what they had built together was so much more than that temporary steadying. They had created a partnership, a true union of two souls who complemented and completed each other. As they finally rose to go inside for the night, Hannah paused at the door and looked back at the starlit desert. Somewhere out there, she thought, there might be another frightened young woman, another person running from a life they could not accept. She hoped that person would find their own gentle cowboy, their own oasis of kindness and love in a harsh world. "Ready for bed?" Samuel asked, holding out his hand. Hannah took it, feeling the familiar calluses, the warmth, the strength that had steadied her so many times over the years. "Always," she said, and together they walked into their home, into the life they had built with love and determination and faith in each other. The years continued to pass gently for Hannah and Samuel Quinn. They celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in 1911, surrounded by their 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and a growing number of great-grandchildren. The celebration was held at the ranch, with half the town of Fort Yuma in attendance. Someone took a photograph of the whole family gathered on the porch of the ranch house. 4 generations of Quinns, a testament to the love that had started with a cowboy's gentle hands steadying a frightened woman's trembling ones. Samuel lived to be 79 years old, remaining active on the ranch until just a few months before his death in 1919. He passed peacefully in his sleep, lying next to Hannah in the bed they had shared for nearly 40 years. Hannah woke that morning to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still resting on hers. The grief was overwhelming, but Hannah bore it with the strength she had developed over their decades together. She had lost the love of her life, but she had their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. She had the ranch they had built together, the legacy they had created. Samuel lived on in all of it. Hannah lived another 12 years, dying in 1931 at the age of 88. She remained sharp and active until the end, still managing the ranch books, still teaching her great-grandchildren to read, still sharing stories of the old days in the Wild West with anyone who would listen. Her favorite story, the one she told most often, was about the day she arrived in Fort Yuma with trembling hands, and how a gentle cowboy had held them until they steadied. She would tell about their courtship, their wedding, building the ranch, raising their family. But she always came back to that first moment, that first touch, when Samuel had given her exactly what she needed: kindness, patience, and the steady calm that had seen her through every challenge life brought. When Hannah died, she was buried next to Samuel in the little cemetery outside Fort Yuma, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates, and one additional inscription that their children had chosen: together always. The Cottonwood Creek Ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants. James's son, Samuel James Quinn, named after his grandfather, eventually took over operations, and the ranch remained in the Quinn family for generations. The story of Hannah and Samuel became family legend, passed down through the years. Their great-great-grandchildren would hear about the brave woman who came west alone seeking independence, and the gentle cowboy who loved her, steadied her, and built a life with her that spanned decades. In the end, what had started with a simple act of kindness, with warm hands grasping cold, trembling ones, had grown into something magnificent. A love story for the ages, a testament to the power of gentleness in a harsh world, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures come not from seeking them, but from finding the courage to accept kindness when it is offered. Hannah had arrived in Fort Yuma, running from a life she could not accept, with no plan beyond survival and independence. She could never have imagined that the cowboy who helped her that first day would become her husband, the father of her children, her partner in building an empire and the love of her life. But Samuel had seen something in her that day, something beyond the fear and the trembling. He had seen strength waiting to be discovered, courage waiting to be awakened, and a heart that matched his own in its capacity for love and loyalty. Together, they had proven that love built on mutual respect, kindness, and partnership could weather any storm. They had shown their children and grandchildren what a true marriage looked like, not a relationship of dominance and submission, but one of equals who chose each other every day, who steadied each other through life's challenges, who built something beautiful together. The little house Hannah and Samuel first rented in Fort Yuma was long gone, torn down to make way for newer buildings as the town grew and modernized. But the ranch house they built at Cottonwood Creek still stood, expanded over the years but with the original structure at its heart. The cottonwood trees they had loved were ancient now, their roots deep in the Arizona soil, as deep as the roots the Quinn family had put down in this harsh but beautiful land. And if sometimes, on quiet desert evenings, the wind seemed to carry whispers of laughter and conversation, the echo of two people who had loved each other deeply and built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, well, perhaps that was just the desert's way of remembering its own. Hannah Dawson Quinn and Samuel Quinn had lived and loved in the waning days of the Wild West, in a time when the frontier was closing and the modern world was beginning to intrude. But their story remained timeless, a story of courage and kindness, of fear overcome and love discovered, of a trembling woman steadied by gentle hands and two souls who found in each other everything they needed to build a life worth living.